Hi, welcome back as we read Chapter 6, Expert Engineer. Frankie's eyes grew wide as Aunt Nichelle placed a huge slice of lemon meringue pie in front of her. The way the meringue was piled up seemed to defy gravity. Of course, if anyone could defy gravity with a pie or anything else, it was Frankie's Aunt Nichelle. She was a rocket scientist and a really great baker. They were finishing up their Sunday dinner. Once a month, Frankie's family went over to have dinner with their aunt, uncle, and cousins. Frankie's cousins were still babies pretty much. Frankie didn't mind playing with them for a little bit, but she much preferred spending time with her Aunt Nichelle and hearing what she was working on. All through dinner, Frankie had been thinking about how she could prove her trap was foolproof. Now, though, her brain was finally distracted. She scooped up a bite of pie and let it dissolve in her mouth. Delicious! It was like taking a bite of the summer that was on its way. Did you see the simile there, where she's comparing the pie to summer? Right here, it was like taking a bite of summer that was on its way. Good, Frankie's Uncle Charlie chuckled. Mm-hmm, Frankie nodded, her mouth too full of pie to say a real word. Well, finish up, because after dinner, I need a young inventor to help me with the problem, Aunt Nichelle said. Frankie ate so fast that the pie disappeared like one of her magic tricks. Aunt Nichelle brought Frankie into her home office. Some of my colleagues are working on space gardens, Aunt Nichelle said. We want to be able to grow food up in space so the astronauts can have fresh fruit and vegetables. That's cool, Frankie said. They'll still get space ice cream though, right? If they want it, Aunt Nichelle said, wrinkling her nose. Frankie loved space ice cream, which was basically a block of ice cream flavored foam that melted in your mouth. Aunt Nichelle called it an insult to taste buds. They'd had a lot of luck with greens, and potatoes seem to be doing well. Now they're working on juicier vegetables. Aunt Nichelle called up a file on her computer. Called up a file on her computer. She showed Frankie pictures of space gardens where different types of lettuce grew. The soil was all contained in boxes so it wouldn't fly around in the outer space greenhouse. The water was piped right into the boxes too. Then Aunt Nichelle showed her a video of a tomato bursting in a zero-gravity environment. The goo and the seeds from the inside went everywhere. You see the problem? Aunt Nichelle asked. What a mess! Can't they put a box around it like they do for the soil and water? That way, if one tomato bursts or breaks, it will be contained, Frankie said. Smart girl, Aunt Nichelle replied. That's what they've been trying. It seems to work pretty well. They're figuring out a way to clean out the box so that way when they open it, any mess doesn't fly out. After all, each tomato plant produces many tomatoes, and our workers don't want to give up a whole plant just because one tomato explodes. Frankie nodded. So, what do you need my help with? I need you to tell me all the ways a tomato might break. Frankie thought about this for a second. Sometimes she helped her in her dad's nursery, so she knew a lot about plants. The tomato plants were some of her favorites because they smelled and tasted so good. Sometimes the tomatoes get too heavy and the stem breaks. Sometimes they grow with cracks in them. Sometimes people bump them. Little kids like to squeeze them, not like there would be a lot of kids in space or animals. They steal them sometimes and make a mess. Good list, Aunt Nichelle said. Anything else? Think big, think wild. Aunt Nichelle always told her to think wild because sometimes in the wildness there was a good idea. Well, here on Earth, a hurricane could knock them down or an earthquake. So I guess, is there turbulence in space? If there is, then that could knock the tomatoes off the vines. And then they'd fall. She stopped herself. Well, they wouldn't fall. They would float up and then hit the roof of the box and maybe break. Aunt Michelle laughed. Now you've got your thinking cap on. She was writing down everything Frankie said. Do you think the lack of gravity could make them burst somehow? Frankie asked. Like maybe they would grow differently or something? We're definitely looking into that. Why do you want to know all the ways that a tomato might break anyway? Well, when you're inventing something, it's a good idea to think of all the ways that things might go wrong. You want to identify all the possible ways that your invention might fail. And then you can address those possibilities. Frankie thought about this for a minute. Like a trial and error? Exactly, Aunt Michelle said. But in this method, you're anticipating the errors, not waiting for them to just happen. Frankie thought some more. That's what I need to do with my leprechaun trap, she exclaimed. Your what? Aunt Michelle asked. Frankie explained about the trap and how Maya wanted to prove that the trap hadn't failed. I need to anticipate all the ways it could fail and improve my design so that my trap is undoubtable. Aunt Michelle grinned and tapped Frankie on the nose. That's why, my dear, you are my favorite inventor. Now let your creativity run wild and come up with all the ways that leprechaun trap might fail. To let her creativity run wild was not something Frankie needed to be told twice. It was how her brain operated most of the time. However, it was time to go home and to go to bed. Her brainstorm would have to wait until the next day.